data. We're going to get the data from our file. We have the data in a text file. So we're going to go to from text/csv. So I have a folder here. We're going to connect to the text data, store data. We're going to click on import. That should allow us to connect to the data source. We're going to click transform data. In Excel 2016, it would probably be an edit button here. Set up transform data. The result is the data will get loaded into Power Query. This shouldn't really be month, this should be date. So we're going to double click on that header, call it date. The data types are correct. So we want to use the data here to build our outlier model. We need to do some calculations on the data. Since we want to be able to group the data by store, work out the average of the sales. We want to look at the total sales. We also want to look at the standard deviation in the sales, and we also need to work z-value calculations. And basically, if we have a z-value of plus or minus 3 or more, then we tend to say that revenue values which correspond to that would be outlier values. So to group the calculations by store, we need to right click on the store name in Power Query, and we're going to click on group by. Since we have to look at multiple calculations, we'll have to use advanced. So we group in by the store name, but we want to get a total by store. So we can put store total here. And we wanted to do a sum, and we wanted sum based on the revenue column. We're going to add an aggregation to get the average. The store average. We're going to change this here to average calculation. We want to perform that on the revenue column. We want to get the standard deviation. So we're going to add an aggregation. We're going to call it store std dev. We're going to use that trick to do it because there is no standard deviation calculation here. So we're just going to use sum here for the minute, and we want that sum perform on the revenue. We also want the revenue displayed for each transaction. So we're going to add another routine to give us the details for each transaction. We want to use all rows. We want to click OK. Once we do this, we're going to be able to expand the data. The only thing we want to do here, though, we need to change the standard deviation calc. So if we actually go into the editor menu here, at the top for the formula, you would see in here that to do a sum calculation on data is list.sum. And then we did an average calculation, and then we named this calculation standard deviation, but we didn't do a standard deviation. So list dot is always precedes these type of calculations. So the calculation exists in the M programming code for Power Query, but not in the interface. So what we will do here is, if we highlight the word sum, let's start typing here ST, and notice that there is a list of standard deviations. We want to select that. That will give us the standard deviation calculation for revenue. So we're going to hit enter here, and now we will, so that is now built in. We're going to click on the expansion button for the details here column. Take out the original name as prefix. We have the store name already here, so we don't need that repeated from the details. We want to keep the date and the revenue amount because we wouldn't have it in the details here. So if we click OK, we now get for each store the store total in terms of the sales, the store average, the standard deviation, the date of the transaction, and also the revenue amount for each transaction that occurred during the year for the particular branch. The next step would be to calculate the z value from the data. To do that, we're going to have to add a conditional column. So we're going to go to the add column menu. We're going to do a custom column. The column would be to calculate the z value. So we're going to call this z value. And the formula for that would be equal to the revenue amount. We're going to put this in brackets here. We're going to take the revenue amount for a transaction and minus from that the store average. And we're going to divide that by the standard deviation. So we could see how many standard deviations away from the mean the revenue transaction falls. So this is the base formula here. If we click OK, we're going to get these z values here. We want to convert the data type here to a decimal number rather than any. So I'll give you a 1.2 for decimal number. The next step would be to flag the outlier values column. So we're going to click on conditional formatting. I'm going to tell Excel outlier. I'm going to label it outlier value. And we're going to we want to look at the z value column, and we want to check to see if the value is greater than or equal to 3. Then we want to output that value. Once it's greater than or equal to 3, we want to take that value from the z value column. We are going to add a clause for values less than -3 because there'll be another outlier section there. So we want to look at z values less than or equal to, and we're going to look at values less than or equal to -3. We want to tell Excel to take the value that happens from the z value column. Any other values which lie between less than 3 and greater than -3, we want null to appear. We need to type null and command, click OK, and that would give us our outlier value column. So we'll basically see just the outlier values highlighted. So this is our detailed outlier report. If we go to the home menu, we could click on close and load, and that should load the data back into Excel. One thing I forgot to do is to probably put the date and the revenue transaction on the left. So I'm just going to open this back up in Power Query, and I'm going to select the date column, control click for the revenue column, right click on the header for date, and I'm going to say move those columns to the beginning. So these are the two columns here, and then we have the store name. So close and load will bring it back into Excel. So now we have the detailed data report here. The next step would be to create just a summary outlier report. So right click on store data. You want to create a reference to the store data query, which will be a link to that. And all we need to do is filter out the outlier values. So here we just want to untick nulls. We just want the outlier values. So this is our outlier report. We'll call this. So that's store data 2 is going to be called the outlier report. And this as well, we're going to close and load. And that should bring it back as a table in the Excel file. The next step will be we want to build a outlier chart report. So to do that, we'll use scatter charts. So we're going to select the data column here. So I'm going to hover on that date column and select the revenue column. If we look here, we have those two data columns selected. Control backspace will bring us back to the top. We're going to create a scatter chart. So we go into the insert menu and we're going to choose scatter chart here. So this is the base scatter chart based on the revenue data and the dates. What we need to do at this stage is we could probably move this to the Outlier report sheet. But before we do that, I wanna have a way to label the outlier values on the chart automatically. So to do that, we're gonna use a trick with the data table. So if we go to the chart here, we want to tell, and this is a little bit tricky to do it, but if we go to the chart menu and we select format, we could tell it to select all the series values. So we want to select all the series 1 values. And then we right click on one of these selected values, like this one here, and we're going to say add data labels. So everything basically will have a data label, but we don't want that to happen. We just want the outlier values to have a data label. So the way how we achieve that is we're going to create a data label column in this data to flag the outlier values. And so to do that, I'll probably use the if function equal to if, open bracket, and I'm going to tell it the user is blank function is a conditional function to check to see if the cell is blank. We want to look at the outlier value cell. Basically, it's saying if this cell is blank, what we wanted to do, comma, value if true should be show nothing. Else, we wanted to take the revenue value from here. So basically, if it sees the outlier value, it's going to display this value here, but I want it coded with O to the front. So what I would do here is put open double quotes O, space, close double quotes, ampersand sign. And what I join in here is the number. So to get that number to display properly, I'll have to use the text formula. And I want to get this here picked up, the number, and I'm going to format that as a number. So I'm going to use open double quote, number sign, comma, number sign 00, right? Close quote, close bracket for that text formula, close bracket to close the initial if formula. So if I hit enter here, that should automatically flow down and it gives me a proper formatting for the outliers that we could apply to the chart. So what I want to do at this stage is to replace these the chart data labels with just the data labels for the outlier. So once we on the chart is active, we could go to the format menu and we could tell Excel to select the data labels and then format that selection. So over here, I want to choose value from cells, and the data labels I really want to use would be in this column here. So I don't want to pick up the whole column, the million rows. I just want to pick up the data labels corresponding to these cells. So I hover on that data label column and it should pick up the 231 to 186. So if I click OK here, that should be sufficient to pick up those values. And if we untick the Y value here, only the outlier values should be highlighted. The other thing I would have wanted to do was to color code the outlier values probably in red so that they stand out. So I could just go back to format selection and go to the text options here and just change the text fill to tell it take like a red text for me. The next step would be to actually put this chart in the same sheet with the outlier report. So we could press Ctrl X to cut the chart. Then we go to the outlier report. To the right, we're going to press Ctrl V, and the chart will now be here, and we should see the outlier values here. If we hover on it, you would see what that data point corresponds to. The next thing we want to do is to create a slicer for the chart by store. So once you go to the data here, the detailed store data here, we could go to the table design menu and insert a slicer here by the store. What we want to do is move the slicer, so we're going to press Ctrl X onto the outlier report sheet. We could probably put it somewhere here. And this way, once we actually choose a store, it should limit the values, the outliers by the store. So like if I choose Arima here, we'll see Arima has just 2 outliers, and that would correspond to these 2 here on the table. If I choose Chaguanas or Cuba or maybe San Fernando, you will see that we now have just 1 outlier here, and that would correspond to the outlier if we have on it. That happened on the 3237, and that was in San Fernando. 64,801 was the revenue figure. San Fernando, 64,801 revenue figure. That's this value.